This here on KTN News Desk. I am Ashley Mazuri. Now, the ongoing revenue bill standoff now and the Supreme Court governors and the National Assembly to resume mediation talks. Mediation failed in the recent past despite calls by the Chief Justice David Maraga to have parties talk and negotiate. Last Friday, the chairman of the Council of Governors, Wycliffe Oparanya, insisted that the National Treasury must release 335 billion shillings for the counties to effectively operate. We understand that the governors want to issue a press statement. Let's cross over. But first, let's just talk to our reporter, Murimi Mwangi, who has been following up on this story. Murimi, good afternoon. So the Supreme Court has just adjourned the hearing of revenue share. Why is that?
Well, the case was to begin today for the hearing, but there was an application from the Speaker of the National Assembly for the court to adjourn its sessions to give an opportunity for the legislative process behind the bill, which of course emanates from the fact that the National Assembly has already republished the division of revenue bill whose mediation talks flopped. And therefore, this essentially means that the speakers of the two houses must resume the legislative process, which goes to the debate of the bills in question. But the complication that comes in now is the fact that despite the National Assembly having published their own version of the bill, the upper house, the Senate, also published a different version with a different figure of how much money should go to the counties. The period of 14 days will be critical in terms of the search for a political solution to the dispute as the parties resume the case here for a mention after 14 days, during which time the two speakers ought to have reported back to the Supreme Court on the status of any steps that might have been taken in terms of resolving this particular standoff. Michelle.
Thank you very much, Murimi Mwangi. Now, let's bring some of the arguments from the earlier court sessions.
My Lord, the timeline set on the publication of the DORA, the Division of Revenue Bill, by the Constitution is 2 months before the end of the financial year. That is there for a purpose, so that that process is completed before the end of the financial year. In fact, the Public Finance Management Act pushes it further back to February to allow more time. My Lords, we are now in July. We're now in August. We're now in August. The Division of Revenue Bill has not been passed. Now, the National Assembly, indeed even the Senate, the national government has the luxury of an extended time of mediation because they have appropriated their budget. They are spending. The context which we find ourselves in is that the county governments are unable to appropriate, they are unable to spend. We are now in July. My Lords, that calls for a crisis management. The reason why the COG, the applicants came here with whom we associate, is because as a last resort, we have a crisis. And to allow this process again to go through another mediation in that manner, that mediation was intended to be there for a purpose. That purpose has been defeated so far, and there are serious prejudices to the county governments. My Lords, the point that has been made by my learned senior, Mr. Ngatia, is correct. If there was appetite for mediation, there would have been no need for the houses to publish two different bills. That should tell the court that we have a major crisis beyond what the Constitution anticipates. And the responsibility, my Lord, and the reason why we come to this court is when such a situation arises, the only other person who can resolve this sort of situation is this court. If we leave it to the parties, we will be back here in another 45 days, and maybe another third bill will have been published, and will be undergoing similar mediation. But the prejudice, not to governors, to county governments and the citizens of this country, will be immense. And so, my Lords, we come here recognizing that these are not straightforward fact and provision questions. These are questions that deal with fundamental principles which will help unlock this perennial process. And if the court can help us do that, it will have done a great service, not just for county governments, but even for the national government with a level of certainty. So, my Lords, my lady, that's why we come here, to ask what is the purpose of these provisions and how do we ensure that these processes achieve their objects and achieve their purposes. How do we achieve the ends of Article 219? that requires that the money due to county governments it's released constitutionally very early, but there's no money to be released. So we are saying